Welcome to another episode of Living with Annietue. I'm Annie Lieb, and my gratitude alarm just went off. I'm very thankful right now and grateful for my audience. I can't wait to hear you engage with this wonderful guest. I have a fabulous person today. I always have great people, but this person is close to my heart because we're like-minded and in the spirit of giving and just a loving, giving human. Oleg Lougheed is here tonight. Here he is. Hi.
How are you?
I'm
Thank you
good.
for having me here.
So I have a 9-year-old. So my office is off my bedroom, and I have a 9-year-old right now who's camped out on my bed and refusing to leave. So she doesn't really care that there's a live podcast going on. So if we hear like her screaming for Robux, doing the Xbox or the iPad or whatever, that's what it is. Hi, Joseph. How you doing? What's going on, buddy?
That's not a problem. I have a 9-year-old dog. I think he's 9-year-old dog. He's 9 years old. He's walking around the office right now looking for food. So if we hear anyone eating food or anything else in the background, might as well apologize in advance.
I think we should do that too for my dog. He's a rescue. He's like licking himself constantly, like that like constant licking of his like legs and parts. I'm like, is that just a boy thing, or I don't know, but it's constant. So all these noises and different things we'll try to just we'll try to ignore. So this is what I pretty much do on my shows. So I love to give the guest an opportunity. Hi, Anne. How you doing? Mom life. I know. I'm like, I have a podcast. She's like, what? Who cares? It's every week. I'm like, great. I like to give my guests a chance to kind of introduce themselves. And if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of background on what it is you're about, I would love to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will.
Yeah. Great question. And first of all, thank you for having me on here. Thank you for doing all the work that you've done. When I think about who I am and that, in a way, ultimate question, the very first thing that comes to mind is I'm someone who's genuinely curious. I'm genuinely curious and learning as much as I can about my own experience on this planet, as well as the experiences of others, because what I genuinely believe in is that at the end of the day, however long or however hard, I convinced myself that there was so many things that I could accomplish on my own. I had realized that after a while, even though there might be a grain of truth to it, it's not the ultimate truth. It is about being connected to other people such as yourself and anyone else within similar spaces and communities. And that's the thing that really drives me at the heart, is just the curiosity about the human experience and how people view life, what it means for them to be alive, and just being able to create a space where some have told me that, it's difficult questions to ask. For me, it's just everyday questions that I choose to ask myself to get even deeper within this experience. Outside of that, if I look at any specific labels that are associated with me, I manage a nonprofit called Overcoming Odds, and that's just really about creating a space for other people to be seen and to be appreciated through their stories. And you were one of the guests on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we've had an opportunity to connect on that particular platform. But, that's really who I am at the core, is just someone who's genuinely curious about learning about other people and wanting to know more. Like what's next? What's next within this human experience for all of us?
So I just went like this, and I was coloring this morning with my daughter, so that's why my hand is green, in case anyone thinks like I smushed like a Smurf or something, or like was eating a lot of M&Ms before the show. But no, so you're like wise and mature, in my opinion, way beyond your years. How did that? Hi, Carl. How are you, Carl Sean? Nice to see you. Hi, Michael. Great to see you. How did that sort of happen? What do you attribute that to?
It's a really good question. And I don't think I have a single answer. Rather, I'd probably just have a combination of different things that I've become aware of that have really contributed to my growth and the perspective that I have today. So first things first, one of the biggest things that I value when it comes to anything in life, it is the ability to have a perspective. I believe that everything is a matter of perspective or opinion. I mean, you and I can look at the same exact thing and yet see two different things. and it doesn't make yours right and mine wrong. We're both right according to the lens that we're seeing it. What attributed to that particular mindset was, man, hundreds and hundreds of books. I would say the very first one that I can recall that started this whole process was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I read that book cover to cover in, I don't know, 48 hours. And then I read it again immediately after. But the second time that I read it, I chose to take a different approach to it. And that is, instead of breezing through the whole book, I went chapter by chapter. So I'd read a chapter and I would just set it down. And somehow what I began to realize was that because I read a chapter every day or every week, in a way I was setting these intentions for the rest of my life. You know, because there's something interesting, and I'm sure you might have experienced this as well. When you are so ingrained in a particular thought or a frequency, like everything else over that course of the day somehow connects. And it's crazy to think about because these are like very random experiences. I mean, this morning I was, prior to getting on the flight, I was thinking about just what does it mean to be alive, and how do you accept people? How do you accept all these different perspectives? And I got on the Delta flight and I was flying back from Ann Arbor to Austin. And so I was scrolling through all the different films that are available on it. And I don't know if you've seen this film or anyone else, I highly recommend it. It's called It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks. Just incredible. I mean, I kid you not. 2 hours long. For 2 hours straight, I cried. I laughed. I was left in just absolute like awe. I thought about my relationships.
Did this get lost in COVID, or like was this new or old? Like what happened?
I don't know.
You think that we'd know?
I think it came out somewhat recently, but maybe COVID and some of these other headlines jumped ahead of it. But I watched the movie, and for the two, it was just so thought-provoking, intuitive, inquisitive. And so the more I started to look at that, I just realized that like that's me. Like that's how I started to understand all these experiences. So long story longer, it's been hundreds of books, it's been hundreds of podcasts. I used to almost every single day for at least 2 to maybe even 3 years listen to Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, Oprah Winfrey. And after a while, what I begin to understand now is the more you consume a certain thing, the more you become it. I actually think that when I read a book, I don't read a book, I become a part of that book. That's what I believe in.
So we have someone that saw the movie, so that's good. Hi, Aaron. That's amazing. But there's a little bit more I'm trying to get at. A little bit more. Do you consider yourself an old soul?
I think so. Is
this something that you felt since you were a little boy? Because I know you've had, quite the experience in your youth growing up and becoming this adult.
Yeah.
I don't know where you think that contribution is.
I think I probably am an old soul. I'm having a difficult time understanding what that is, because I don't believe that wisdom is a guaranteed byproduct of aging. Sure. I think wisdom comes from many different things, perspective, conversations, whatever it is. In fact, I've met people who are 12 and 14 years old, and yet it felt like I was having a conversation with someone way in their 70s or 80s, just the different things that they realized. So I would definitely say that, yes, the old soul initially formed from my early childhood experience. The adversity that I had to face probably from the very early days of almost being born. I mean, being brought up in a household where my dad was in prison, my mom was an alcoholic, and my sister, who was 18 years older and still is, was my legal guardian. It put me in very difficult circumstances. Mm-hmm. And if there was ever a time where I felt my survival was in question and at stake, it was those times. It was those 12 years where I felt that not only was my whole life in transition, but every single moment was so precious because I really had to be in the moment to figure out what is the one beyond that. Like there was really no time to kind of take a break. Like, he was always on the go, was always thinking about the future. And I think part of that has helped me develop many of these elements that probably old souls do have.
Do you think, and there's a lot of people chiming in saying, yes, you're an old soul. And Tam said, two authentic souls owning the vulnerability, wisdom beyond your years for sure. So there's definitely, hi Melody, good to see you. So I guess, I'm wondering, I definitely feel like I have an old soul. And the reason I say that is because I think it happened to me because of the situation of just in a chaotic household as a baby and having my antennas be up and being born an empath. Just all of that together was like a big bowl of shit. And I don't know if because of your situation and your circumstances that it sort of just put your guard up automatically, put your antennas up, and you were always on guard. And that sort of makes us more feeling and almost as if we had gone through the lives before.
Yeah, it probably does. And in fact, as I think about my own experiences, oftentimes when I'm faced with adversity or whatever the challenge may be, because I've gone through it so many different times, I just know internally that I'm going to get through this one and the next one and the one beyond that. The challenge, I think, of the circumstances that you and I experienced when we were younger is this whole concept of a home. For me, it's really a huge question mark. Like, what does it mean to be a home when you have transitioned between so many different places that appear to be homes, and yet some of them were as long as a week, a year, a day, so that's where I think I try and better understand what did I learn from that experience? How are those transitions helping me learn and progress? And the biggest thing that I've learned, I think, beyond anything is the more I started to reflect upon all of those challenging circumstances from my past, I began to realize that I really had a choice. And that is, I had the choice to, I guess, live in what one would call a victim mindset, be defined by the circumstances, tell the story of how it was and not how I aspired it to be. And the second option was to step into it, own the different things that happened, and choose to be grateful. I mean, in a way, that's one of the principles behind your show, right? Choosing to be grateful for all the different events. Because I was having a conversation like this morning, and I said to the individual, I said, had one of the things been different, whether it was in my first 12 years or the last 15, I may not be here having this conversation with you. One event, could change the trajectory completely. So at this point, I no longer look at those circumstances and people as those to blame and point the finger on, or rather, I flip the script. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the fact that even though my birth mom was not able to take care of me in a way that the society expected her to, her presence and her ability to give me birth has given me this chance. It gave me a chance to write a script that literally would not have been possible had it not been for her.
You're truly being grateful for all of the obstacles and adversities and things you've had to go through. And that's really, really evolved. I mean, that's like, to get to that place, it takes people, many, many, many years and much wisdom. So I commend you for that, because it is really, truly a perspective. It's all in how we look at everything. And that's how this whole conversation started with us tonight. It's how we see things. You can flip the script. So what's your advice to people thank you, Carl Sean. He said this is must see TV. Hey, I can't argue with that. I can't argue with that. What's your advice to people who are, and I know for a fact, because people have contacted me after our shows, that are in a stuck place, and they're like, Annie, help me. Everything is bad. I'm stuck. Just to sum it up.
Yeah.
How do you suggest, or what's your advice to people to flip that script? How does one do that?
Well, two things come to mind. First is in regard to adversity, how I choose to approach it is whenever I experience an adverse circumstance, I very quickly try and ask myself internally, what is this here to teach me? And what am I here to learn? Through that reframe, I'm no longer sucked into the circumstances. Rather, I develop almost like an outsider perspective, where I can look at the whole situation from the position where I'm not fully involved, even though I am. The other part that comes to mind when it comes to maintaining this open perspective when it comes to different things, when I was back home for these past 2 weeks, my dad brought up this genius example, and I don't even know if he thought about it that way. It probably just like any other conversation where you just have it, and then a couple of days later, I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, he just gave me like 30 years worth of wisdom in just 3 sentences. And what he chose to share was right before he was walking, he went on a walk with our dog. He stood in the hallway and he shared this concept. I had asked him the question. I said, how do you pick which conflicts you are involved in and which ones you choose to put aside in a marriage? He's been married for 35 years.
You ask a lot of questions about marriage. I love how you
gotta start now, right? And so I asked that to my dad because I'm being curious. I mean, being married to someone for that many years, there's got to be things about not only yourself, but maybe the other person you experience tension with. Like if you like a clean house and the person doesn't clean the dishes, what are you going to do for 35 years? You're going to clean the dishes? So I got curious and I started asking these questions. And the thing that he shared with me, which goes back to this whole concept of maintaining an open mind and perspective, completely blew my mind. He said, think about washing dishes. There are 101 ways to wash dishes. Some people prefer to fill up 2 sinks, one with soap, the other one with clean water. Some people prefer to fill up 1 sink. Some people don't prefer to fill up either of the sinks. Rather, just leave the water running the whole time and then you wash as you go. Other people don't use the sinks at all. Other people use the dishwasher. And he literally said, think about those 4 examples. Now, none of them are right and none of them are wrong. They just are. It's just a matter of preference. Like, what do you prefer and why do you choose to do that thing to begin with? I choose to wash dishes personally, not for the sake of washing the dish, but for me, it's a free form of therapy. Like, it's a free form of therapy where I can sit there for 10, 15, 20 minutes and do nothing but concentrate on a specific thing or go through a specific thought pattern and be able to experience my own breakthroughs. Now, on the surface, you can look at the whole concept of washing dishes and you can look at you may only look at one variable, and it's the water that's being consumed. So then you can measure that in volume and find the best method. But the reality of the matter is there's so many other variables within that experience that I find value from. So then the question for me becomes in that particular thing is when someone is doing something differently, it doesn't make them any right. It doesn't make them any wrong. It just is. They're right according to the way that they're seeing it. So
there's a monkey wrench that I'm going to throw in here that happens when you are married.
Yeah.
It takes the whole thing and it spins it on its head, right? And it's, why am I washing these friggin' dishes? That person's sitting on their ass and I'm washing his dirty dishes, right? And I do this every night for 35 years.
Yeah.
So if you can get to that point without feeling resentful, that's amazing. You're amazing. But the whole thing is, it is again, then I think it comes down to communication and talking about, why you're doing the dishes and how. And why this is the way you want it done, or this is how you think it should be done. And but I think what you said is so important about having an open mind, because like you said, there's different ways to do different things. And there's just not enough relationships, not just marriage, relationships where there are 2 open minds functioning together.
And one other thing that my dad shared with me. So here's one resource that I'm reading right now. This is a book called Negotiating the Non-Negotiable, How to Solve Your Most Emotionally Charged Conflicts. The second part that he shared with me was, in his own perspective, having been in a marriage for 35 years, what he said is that if there are certain things that he has tension with, or there are certain things that he finds annoying, what he chooses to do is actually adapt that behavior. For example, the problem of dishes or having dirty dishes or having the kitchen look like a scene from Jurassic Park, it's only a problem for you. It may not be a problem for the other person.
Right.
They may see it as perfectly fine, but you see it as like the world's on fire. So that's where I think this whole concept, that's another thing I try and remind myself is like, the problem is truly you. I mean, like, really think about it. Like, in any regard, the problem is you. Whatever you're having tension with, very rarely is it actually the other person. It's just the other person is triggering something within you that may be like a new experience or something that you're not used to, something that's completely off track from the routine and the, you know, schedule that you've put together for yourself. So
yeah, whatever it is that's bothering you is usually about you. And if you turn that lens inward versus out, right?
Yeah. And recognize it and try and understand, what is it? Why am I having the tension? Who is it with? What's causing it? And then from there, just decide. I mean, which of those would you like to have a conversation around? The other, here's another thing that it's directly tied to everything we're discussing from It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Mr. Rogers, or Tom Hanks, towards the end of the movie, he has this conversation with the father who's about to pass away. And he sits on the couch and he says one thing. He says, anything mentionable is manageable. So any topic that you can talk about, even the difficult topics such as death, loss, cheating, dishonesty, whatever it is, if you can talk about it, if you can acknowledge it, if you can recognize it, difference of opinion, difference of leadership, then you can find ways to manage it. Whatever those ways are completely up to you and the other parties involved. But I just thought that was such a profound statement, because anything that, you know, it's like, think about like your own platform. Anything you give a voice to
has a voice.
And then it becomes something else. Like it develops into something that was once upon a time not a thing. I mean, had you not given yourself a voice to be able to express your own life and live perspectives and insights, the show would not exist. These people right now that are on this show would not be here sharing the space with us. So that's where I think turning it inward and kind of looking at yourself in the mirror and asking yourself those questions. And the other thing is this: they don't have to be difficult. They're only as difficult as you make them to be. I mean, what is truly difficult about having a discussion about death? Nothing. It's only as whatever you think the difficult thing is, it's only difficult because you're making it difficult. That's what I believe in.
And so what I think you need to do is, I wish that I could put you in a room with all people that are like about to get married and then also about to have a baby. And I'm dead serious when I say that. But if I could clone you and put you in rooms all over the world with couples that are about to get married.
Yes.
And also, and then after that, couples that are about to have a baby, right? Those are two different times in your life that are so crucial and important. And when you typically think you know everything, you really do, because I've been in both. And to have someone like you put that perspective out there and say, you know, if you could just turn your lens inward, you know, if I had that wisdom, things may have been different for me. Not that I want to be anywhere else than right here, right now, because I don't. But things would have been different. The trajectory of everything would have changed, because I would have turned the lens and gotten out of my own way. And I think so many people are in their own way.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's one of the things that I've learned after having had however many different conversations by now is, I mean, the biggest thing that I've learned is that the only limit is you, period. That's it. There's no other thing. Because everything else starts with a story, or many of the other things start with a story. So there were times when I would think that X, Y, and Z was a limitation, when the reality of the matter was, it was just a story I told myself.
Right, the narrative,
Yeah, it was all about the narrative. It was all about that. And the other thing that I'll point out to kind of this whole wisdom and aging and everything topic is, what I'm finding is that the more I age, the more unsure I become about different things. and what I mean by that is when I was younger, I was very definitive in the answer, in the approach. Like if you told me that, hey, what about this way? Or could it be this? Like,
Right.
no way, here's the speed limit and there's no other thing outside of that. And as I started to grow up and mature and expose myself to other people's perspectives and way of thinking, I just started to feel a lot less sure about different things. And not like confidence.
More flexible and more adaptable.
More flexible, more adaptable. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. And that's what I've realized is just that hearing so many different people's perspectives, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword though, because the more perspectives I think I put myself in front of, the more opportunities I can also create for myself where I go into that loop that you mentioned, inaction, not stepping into a project or a passion or desire or whatever it is. Because if you really think about it, if you ask 10 people whether or not you should do it, from those answers alone, it may determine whether or not you're going to do it. And most likely, depending on who you ask, here's another thing, and I don't know why it works the way that it does, but my experience has been is, let's say out of 10 to 20 people, maybe not now, but in the previous years that I would ask what they thought about me doing a certain thing, majority of those answers somehow pointing to the fact of how I wasn't going to be able to do it.
So negative.
Yeah.
No, don't do it. Don't take the risk. You shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Won't be able to pay your bills, won't be able to do this. And I don't know if much of that goes from just people's experiences and just straight up projections of what they've been through in life. And I don't choose to blame them. Like if you haven't been to the moon and you tell someone that it's not a possible thing, well, I mean, it makes sense because you haven't been to the moon. You haven't seen what's possible beyond your own world, beyond your own scope. Same thing with people who are going into the podcasting, the speaking, the writing a book. It's the same exact thing. So that's what I really try and understand is that that narrative, it truly is powerful. I mean, because the story I'm telling myself, it's incredibly convincing.
The quote of the night. Thank you, Anna. Yes.
It's all about the narrative. It truly is.
You were in the middle of the sentence. Sorry. You were saying it's all about the
story. It's all about the narrative. I'm a huge believer in that. I think there's a lot of power within that story. And my experience has taught me this. It is through my own story, I've been able to experience this life. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, and the thing that really stood out to me was 15 years ago, if you would have asked me the question of, do you envision yourself being here? I maybe would have said yes, but it was just such a distant future. And now it's such a distant past where I just look at the two experiences. I mean, it's a night and day. 9-year-old kid living at an orphanage. His only concept of United States was that it was dreamland. The only other person I knew was Michael Jordan. Like that was it. I mean, think about that. That's crazy. I didn't even know how to speak English. I didn't know anything about this part of the world. And yet I chose to step into it. And I was very fortunate to have parents that supported me and continue to support me every step of the way. Teachers that stepped up for me where they didn't have to. My 6th grade teacher used to show up before school and stay with me after school to help me catch up on reading, math.
Remember.
It's people like that make the biggest difference. So that's where I think for me, Brian Kelly once said, it's just the beginning. And that's what it is. This is just the beginning. This is an unfolding of unbelievable story, unbelievable space, and just a space for other people to know that regardless of the circumstances, you can do it.
Thank you so much. It's at the end of our time already. Where did it go? I love listening to you speak, and it's so genuine and authentic where you come from, and it comes from your heart. And I just like just love who you are as a person. You're such a special being, and I'm blessed to have you in my life. I'm so happy that we're connected and we chat and that you came on the show. And I mean, there's so much more to talk about, but the show is only a half hour. So
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you. I know you traveled today and you didn't have to jump on, and I appreciate you doing that. Hold on. You have done yourself proud. You being you adds value to others. You're here in your craft to give to others, for many others to learn from you. You matter greatly to many. Beautiful. You are just a beautiful being, and I'm proud to know you. So thank you for being a part of my show, and I hope we'll get to do it again. Do you have any final thoughts? If anybody wants to find you, LinkedIn, or where do they go?
My first thought is this, and kind of the last thought that I want to share with everyone. I'm a huge believer that everyone is unique. I'm a huge believer that everyone is walking a unique path. And I don't believe that my adversity is any greater than your adversity. You know, the reason why I choose to share my story is not to diminish your experience compared to mine, but rather just be able to recognize that here was my journey and here's how I've done certain things and how I've been able to become aware within it. So for anyone that's listening, I would just highly encourage each and every single one of you, just keep going. I mean, seriously, don't ever give up. Whenever you hear a can't, or whenever you hear a no, just understand that that's just one person's perspective. Mm-hmm. And they might also be fighting a battle of their own when they chose to use those words in a response to you. So you just never know. You never know what anyone's ever going through. You never know what their story might be looking like. And just keep going with whatever it is that you want to do. I know it's beginning of the year. Many people probably want to start on certain aspirations, passions, or projects. Do it. I mean, Nike said it perfectly. Just do it. Mm-hmm. Who cares what it turns out? You will never know what's on the other side until you literally just do it. And isn't it beautiful just to know that whatever it is on the other side that's waiting for you? I think Will Smith said the same exact thing. On the opposite side of fear is everything that you've ever wished for. Mm-hmm. Like, really think about that. Everything you've ever wished for is just on the opposite side. And all it takes is just one step to go within that direction. So LinkedIn is probably the best place that people can connect with me. And beyond that, I would say through Overcoming Odds, and that's overcomingodds.today. And people will be able to connect with us through that.
Beautiful. I love your message. I love everything you have to say. Everyone, good night. Oleg, hang on one sec for me. Everyone, have a great night. Grateful that you've been here. Good night.